InvestorIdeas.com podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcast. In today's podcast, we look at a few public and private company announcements from Rapid Dose Therapeutics Corporation, trading on the CSE as Dose, Medical Marijuana Incorporated, trading on the OTC as MJNA, AMP German Cannabis Group Incorporated, trading on the CSE as XCX, as well as Nations Cannabis. So first starting with Rapid Dose Therapeutics Corporation, who announced it's begun COVID-19 vaccine research in conjunction with McMaster University and the team led by Dr. Alex Andronoff, James Mahoney, and Mark Larch. And the federally funded product tests the use of the Quickstrip trademark for administering vaccines orally as a convenient and safe alternative to injection with needles, the currently accepted delivery format for most vaccines. Now, Dr. Andronoff is a recognized Canadian expert in synthetic polymer chemistry and the development of novel polymer architectures, and Dr. Mahoney has extensive experience in virology and vaccine development, and Dr. Larch is an immunologist with expertise in vaccine research geared toward treatment of common allergies. The combined expertise of this research team will enable development and evaluation of oral vaccine delivery strategies. Jason Lewis, the Rapid Dose Therapeutics SVP, said, Rapid Dose Therapeutics is focused on novel research through collaboration with its experts at McMaster. We see Quickstrip oral mucosa thin film delivery as an efficient solution for distributing vaccines globally, and experts believe that antigens to COVID-19 and other viruses can be delivered sublingually, a much easier and less expensive process than the current single or multi-dose vial methods. And imagine the significance of creating a vaccine that can be then sent in an envelope by mail. Now, Mark Upstell, the RDT CEO, also commented that the current COVID situation requires everyone to think outside the box as to how we might deliver safe, effective, and timely solutions for combating COVID-19 and other viruses that require serum-based defenses. Rapid Dose Therapeutics remains committed to its research and innovation strategy, which is highlighted now by our work on the COVID-19 project's unique delivery format. Rapid Dose Therapeutics provides scale-up testing and bench stress support for the McMaster research team in a race to provide an effective product that can be produced and delivered on a worldwide scale. A successful outcome of this project and its application of our Quickstrip trademark delivery system will create exciting new opportunities for Rapid Dose Therapeutics. So I was talking a little bit yesterday about a few other companies that are also focusing on dealing with COVID-19, either assisting with alleviating symptoms, or also some working on detecting COVID-19. And now as well, we're seeing focused on using their trademark Rapid Dose Therapeutic technology, the Quickstrip technology, for delivering vaccines orally. Again, really rooting for one of these cannabis companies to have a pretty significant impact on COVID-19. That's only going to be a huge boon for the industry. And again, it could also really help shore up investor confidence in this sector. As again, this has been a sector that's been beaten up over the last year and a half pretty aggressively. But this type of research and development, if again, sort of realized, would be a massive impact for the industry. It is interesting that they're focusing on the vaccine side of things, and being able to have male vaccines would be a huge benefit for the world. Not sure if they can get that accomplished, but it'll definitely be something to keep track of over the next months. And speaking of COVID-19 stuff, Medical Marijuana Incorporated. So they've also announced that its investment company, AXIM Biotechnologies Incorporated, trading on the OTCQB as AXIM, has announced the development of a rapid diagnostic test measuring levels of functional neutralizing antibodies that are believed to prevent SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 from infection. Medical Marijuana Incorporated CEO Dr. Stuart Titus commented, "Our portfolio is proud to see the innovation that AXIM has showcased over the past few months. We're optimistic that this test could help make a difference in achieving our end goal of overcoming this virus. Personally, I think that this kind of ingenuity will set us apart from other competitors and allow us to continue to grow in the other facets of our business." Now, unlike currently available COVID-19 tests that detect an antibody response to the virus, AXIM's rapid 10-minute test measures a specific subpopulation of antibodies to block the virus from attacking a person's body. And while there are expensive, time-consuming laboratory tests that measure neutralizing antibodies, this test can be offered with easier convenience, lower cost, and much faster results in 10 minutes than any other test on the market. Now, AXIM's test could also help ensure that vaccines elicit higher levels of neutralizing antibodies, and when a vaccine is available, manufacturers can employ this test to evaluate its effectiveness in vaccine recipients. We have succeeded in creating a test that's cost-efficient, accurate, and fast. and hopefully serving as an immunity passport to vaccine developers as they begin larger phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. AXIM Biotech CEO John W. Humballer, too, said. Now, AXIM has filed a pre-emergency use authorization and is compiling the necessary data for numerous tests recently completed that are needed to apply for an EAU and FDA AXIM approval. Now, AXIM makes clear that while the company intends to file with the EAU and with the US FDA, the US FDA has not yet approved the company's diagnostic test, and there is no guarantee that any EAU, once filed, will be approved. So again, as I was talking about, companies trying to deal with the COVID-19 crisis right now. Another one focusing on the testing side of things. What's interesting to see is how each of these companies have sort of adapted and focused on a different segment of how to address this pandemic. And I do think that cost-effective testing would be a huge benefit for not just the cannabis industry, but for pretty much everyone as a whole, as that is an issue not just in North America, but around the world, is proper testing and having access to it, and also it being affordable. So it will be interesting to see if they can get that EAU or FDA approval. Obviously, they're not super guaranteed on that right now, but definitely something to look at over the next couple of months that could have a pretty significant impact on AXIM as well as Medical Marijuana Incorporated. Next, looking at AMP German Cannabis Group, who announced that it's placed 2 orders for bulk and finished EU GMP medical cannabis flower from a Canadian licensed producer of medical cannabis. Now, AMP will be purchasing and importing to Germany 50 kilograms of EAU GMP medical cannabis in September of 2020, and a further 100 kilograms during January and February of 2021. And AMP and the Canadian LP plan to expand the supply agreement for a month large volume purchases of medical cannabis as well as extracts. Now, the Canadian LP operates under indoor growing and processing facility in Canada and was already EU GMP certified by German authorities earlier this year. Dr. Stefan Bauerstein, president of AMP, commented, "We are seeing a stronger than anticipated demand for medical cannabis in German marketplace, and Canada is one of the few credible suppliers to Germany in the short term. Demand for German pharmacies is so high that AMP will be adding pharmaceutical distributors across Germany that focuses solely on medical cannabis in the upcoming weeks, and our goal is to become a major importer to Germany by the end of 2021. Been talking a lot about the EU market lately. Obviously, lots of traction and lots of buildup going on in that market this year. Now that we're starting to see a little bit more infrastructure developed and a little bit more of the partnerships and trade agreements when it comes to importing cannabis shored up. So now you're starting to see cannabis come into Germany as well as other EU marketplaces. And I do like that he mentioned that obviously Canada is one of the few credible suppliers for Germany in the short term. Showing that they are considering other options for the long term. As I said, Latin America as well as Israel seem to be big players within that market. I would expect one of those two companies or one of those two areas to start having significant impact over the Canadian LPs. There's also some US companies that are starting to get their EU GMP certification. They could also be a big factor, and there are some other parts of the world as well that are starting to make plays into the EU marketplace. It seems like Germany specifically is going to have pretty heavy demand, as well as we're already seeing that in the UK as well, and other markets that are starting to open up. So I would expect that for a lot of the companies that have this EU GMP certification already, it's going to be a pretty busy year for them, and they're probably going to have lots of different sales and import agreements with different companies that are importing into not only Germany, but other EU marketplaces. And lastly, looking at Nations Cannabis, which is an emerging indigenous cannabis cultivation company, and the Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers, also known as ACRES, who announced signing of a memorandum of understanding. The MOU is a perfect marriage whereby Nations will provide a farm-to-store steady supply of cannabis products for the 26 members of the association, representing 65 retail stores. It also presents ACRES with an opportunity to import a truly indigenous brand into the fold with its ability to cultivate new strains where market demands change. And the project value of the agreement is $28 million for the first year and $96 million by the year 3. And this partnership is pivotal in the evaluation of nations, says the company's co-founder and executive chairman, Wes Sam. We're unaware of such an agreement involving an indigenous production company in the province, and ACRES has identified our company as the first it has chosen to collaborate with in this manner. Now, from the perspective of ACRES, the deal is a win-win. We believe Nations will become a premier and earliest indigenous cannabis producer in BC, said Association Interim President Matthew Greenwood. They have a product that will allow our retailers to differentiate themselves from others in the marketplace, and furthermore, partnering with a company that gives an authentic voice to Indigenous peoples is an important aspect of this collaboration and will be exciting for consumers. Now, as a late-stage applicant in the federal licensing approval process, Nation's momentum was halted this spring amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and the construction of its primary cultivation facility was paused. Now, once work resumes, the process of seeking and securing a federal cultivation and processing license will also continue. As investors in the Nation's project, we believe that the agreement with Acres represents real Indigenous economic reconciliation and participation in the cannabis industry, said Chief Dan George of the Burns Lake Band. Now, adding, we're excited to be part of this unique journey with Nations and their partners, and upon licensing approval by Health Canada, Nations hopes to actively begin the process of facilitating a direct market arrangement with Acres and its respective retailers. Licensing approval will help open the door to potential producer supply agreements through BC's liquor distribution brands. And you can find more information about Acres or Nations at acres.ca or nationscannabis.ca. This is something that's been talked about in the Canadian market a bunch, and you haven't seen a lot of traction or buildup of it, but is the First Nations aspect of the cannabis industry. There are a few producers out there, not just Nations Cannabis, that are Indigenous owned. Still hasn't really picked up the momentum everyone was, I think, anticipating. And you still haven't really seen the government support towards the First Nations community that I think a lot of people are expecting, especially from a Trudeau-run government who has boasted a lot of bold claims about loving Indigenous people and has really done very little to support them when it comes to the cannabis industry specifically. I would hope that that'll start to change, and it does seem that at least private retailers and other people within the industry are very supportive of this. I'm really happy that Acres is involved with this company, as well as they have been involved with some very interesting stuff going on in BC right now. I would highly recommend checking out their website, especially when it comes to what's going on between them petitioning the BC government for delivery options, as well as also possibly potentially entering into a lawsuit against BC, the BC government and BC Liquor Distribution Branch for forcing a lot of these companies to have frosted glass on all of their private retail enterprises, and then not forcing any of their new BC-owned government stores to do the same. So basically, they forced a lot of these companies to pay up the ass for something that isn't even going to be required by law in soon enough time. And as well, again, also sort of bogarting the whole delivery system that everyone in Canada has already endorsed except for BC, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. You would think that the BC government would obviously sign that off and approve for at least temporary delivery and curbside pickup. But yeah, I would highly recommend checking out Acres, and hopefully you start to see more First Nations projects like this pop up, not just in BC, but in other parts of Canada, because that is a real hopeful moment, I think, for the cannabis industry, as well as to show some real reparations and real effort to fix some of the First Nations areas of Canada. Similarly to how I'm really rooting for the Colombian cannabis market to succeed as much as possible and really bring some renewed growth to Colombia, as that's a country that's been massively impacted by the drug wars of the last 30, 40 years. The same thing would be what we'd want to see coming for First Nations in Canada and the U.S. as well, where these groups of people actually get some access to some business and get to actually use their land in a way that is beneficial to everyone. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.